Hey guys, you in there? Well, I hope you're grabbing a cocktail. It's been a week, right? Oh my gosh. Wind's blowing so hard out here today. It's like ridiculous. You get a mouthful of dirt. I mean, I feel like that's kind of how every day this week has been, and the wind wasn't blowing. But anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do these for the next couple of weeks. I'm really going to try, but we are in the process of moving, which is crazy right now. We're going back to Sky Air Force Base for an assignment. Hey Mom, you're here. Do you have a drink? You should have a drink. Anyway, so we're in the process of that, and that's really going to happen over the next 3 weeks or so. So I'm going to try to do these as we're in the middle of everything. Oh, I'm so glad you're on the new computer. We'll chat about that later. But we'll be in the middle of all the moving stuff. So, living in the Airstream for a couple weeks, so I'm really excited about that. But I wanted to talk to you guys about the questions that I got about photography, and it was so cool because they weren't about like the technical things. So I hope you know you can always ask about that too, because it just takes a lot of time and practice to get comfortable with that technical stuff. But the questions that I got from friends this week were really a lot about gear, and that's a really good question. And I posed this theme for today as being the punk photographer. There is so much pressure when you get into photography to discuss what gear you have, to compare your gear, to need to know what the next iteration of your camera is coming out. And you know what? Honestly, that makes me insane as a photographer. When people ask about like, well, if I don't have a camera, can I take good pictures? Yes. You can take excellent pictures on your phone. There's going to be limits to what you can do with that as far as isolating emotion sometimes and, with exposure and stuff, but you don't need the Porsche to learn how to drive the car. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's such a dumb analogy, but you can get where you need to go with a basic introductory manual camera. The thing, or even a cell phone, the thing is knowing how to use it best. So one of the first questions I got from my friend Josh, who's just amazing. I hope you have a chance to meet Josh someday if you haven't met him. He's one of the sweetest people I've ever met. He asked about, when do I use my fancy camera versus my cell phone? And the answer I'm going to tell you is you should just always have your fancy camera on you. I mean, first off, hear me out. I know they're heavy, and we can talk about that later too, but the only way you're really going to nail excellent exposure the way you want and composition the way you want is to practice it. The other part is that you have to look at what you did. And it's so easy on our cell phones to take 1,000 pictures and never look back on our pictures, never critique ourselves. But and it's also really easy just to leave your memory card in your camera. So I'm going to caveat all of this by saying y'all got to get those memory cards out of the cameras and into the computer so you can look at what you're doing. So getting a review of your work is super duper important, and your own review of it is really important. So take that big fancy camera with you anywhere you can. I know it might feel weird and you might feel really self-conscious at first, but then you're going to be all punk and you're going to say, I don't care. I like doing this and I'm just going to do it. So do that. Also, it's going to help you really learn. You are not going to learn manual until you learn manual, until you put it on manual and you learn how to drive, how to make it work, okay? So that's my answer. However, if you find that it's just not going to work out for you to bring that big fancy camera everywhere, then really get to know how your phone camera works. Like we discussed, the very first one of these composition tips, using the grid, and editing your pictures is really important. They take fine pictures, but editing them will fine tune them so that they may appear that you took them with a fancier camera than your phone camera. Okay, Anybody have any questions about that? So just use, I mean, phones are fine for every day. But the biggest thing for that is look at your pictures, look at your work. That's how you're going to develop your eye, which is the most important thing. Which brings us to the next question. Will any camera do, or do I need a super fancy camera? Any camera that allows you to do multiple manual exposure, is what you should be using if you're interested in learning that kind of stuff. You don't need to buy the top of the line camera. In fact, I'll tell you, I never buy new cameras. I always go with the model prior and I buy it on eBay because there are so many gearheads in the photography world, and that's great for me because they want the next best thing. And I'm like, that's a little bit out of my budget and I want to be able to get a new lens too. So I just buy the next model down. So what I would say is if you're in the market for a camera, make sure there's one that you like the feel of, because the camera that you use is the camera you should have. So making sure that it's not too big and bulky and heavy if that's a withdrawal for you, if that's something that you don't like, or where the knobs are. I mean, just little things like that can be super frustrating if you don't if you don't like how it feels. So anything that makes it fun for you to use is the camera you want. And if that camera only costs $400 and there's a model higher up that costs $800, that $400 camera is probably gonna be fine for you right now. When you really, really get into it, you can sell your $400 camera and use that to get the $800 camera on eBay for $600. I mean, you see how this is all working? It's good shopping. But having a camera where you can do the manual exposure and buying lenses that you like, those are things that are really important. Any questions about your camera gear? I switched. So I started with Nikon, which is a really good camera line. But I found that when I started getting really into photography, I had 2 little kids, and carrying around that Nikon with a couple of lenses was just more than what I was going to do. So that's why I switched to Fuji and the mirrorless. But if you are not in this space right now to be buying a new camera and you want to start photography, you don't need it. Just use what you've got. Just try to take it out more. That's what I would say. Are bad photos the result of a bad camera or a bad photographer? Now, I'm going to say first, there's no such thing as bad photographer. There's just a new photographer. Give yourself the grace if you are taking pictures and it's frustrating and you're not liking what you do. Just like anything else, you wouldn't scold your child if they didn't understand how to multiply the very first time it was introduced to them. Don't scold yourself for not automatically understanding how to do manual exposure. Take your time. And again, this is when getting those pictures off your camera and looking at them on a bigger screen is really going to help you. So there are bad photographers in that there are people who are not learning how to do what they really are trying to do. So just sit down and take the time and figure out the technical thing that you're interested in. If you're interested in nailing manual exposure, figure that out, then move on to composition. Take it piece by piece and be gentle with yourself because you're learning a new skill. And it is sometimes counterintuitive and it just takes a lot of practice. I hope that helps you guys. But you will develop an eye. The other thing too about being a good photographer is that you develop your eye. And each person's eye is different. I can stand next to my best friend and we'll be taking a picture of the same thing, but for some reason, our pictures are never gonna look the same way. So you developing your eye, and again, that comes from reviewing your work and looking at things that inspire you and thinking about them. Is this picture, does it have a small aperture setting? Is that way I like it? Is it the framing and how it's cinematic? Is that way I like it? Asking yourself those questions will help you develop your eye. Sharing your work is also really important. And I also want to tell you that what I think is a good picture may not be what the professional next door thinks is a good picture, and that's okay. Are you doing this for the person next door? Or are you doing it for yourself? I'm doing it for myself, right? So, punk photography. Anyway, time for a cocktail drink. So embrace the inner punk. Screw what everybody else is saying. Use your cheap camera until you really want to invest in something bigger and just go with it. This is all my advice to you. Will phones, Josh asked another question. Will phones become so good that you don't need a fancy camera? And I'm going to say, I don't really think so. Largely because a fancy camera, the reason you want to use a fancy camera is that it has a larger sensor inside of it, right? The little square that is receiving all the light on it and creating that image that we'll see later. You can't, as far as I've seen, they don't make squares that big in these cell phones because cell phones are doing a lot of other things that it'd have to be very big to do that. So for example, the new iPhone 11 Pro, that sensor is a 12 megapixel sensor, which is way bigger. Remember when we all had those first digital cameras? Oh my gosh, mine flipped around. It was so cool. I love that thing. But that's probably like twice as big as the sensor in that thing was. However, an introductory Nikon camera has a sensor of 24 megapixels. So 12 versus 24, right? That fancy camera has a lot more. Why do you want more megapixels? You have more creativity in there. It's catching more light, so you can do more interesting things with exposure. More megapixels means you can blow those pictures up and make them beautiful big wall art pieces in your house, and they won't look digital. You know, they'll look really, really good. So no, I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon, and I kind of hope it doesn't because sometimes I like to take pictures without my phone there. Do you guys like to do that? You know, if you're going for a hike and you don't want to have be dinged by the rest of the world, just leaving the camera in the car or the phone in the car but taking the camera is really nice. So I hope that that doesn't happen. The other thing about phones and how I don't think they're going to replace large fancy cameras is that you can't change the lens. While they may have different integrated lenses into them, it's not like you can change it. The zooms are usually digital zooms, not optical zooms, which means you're going to see digital byproduct in there. And then like even now, I mean, these algorithms will get better with time, but even now, if you're on your iPhone and you're using it in that portrait mode, when I have dangly earrings sometimes and I have a picture in that portrait mode, it'll like think that my earrings need to be blurred out. So you'll see like the little part through my ear, but you won't see the earring. It's just weird. If I was truly using a fancy camera to take that picture, that would all be in focus and there would be a lovely bokeh. Also, the bokeh, I think, in fancy cameras is nicer than the bokeh on these digital representations of what that should be. So I don't think that's going to happen. So unless anybody else has any questions, I don't want to infringe too much on your Friday afternoons and your cocktails. But to sum up, be a punk. Who cares what anybody else says? If someone's trying to tell you that you bought the wrong camera, they're wrong. Because if you're going to use it, that's the camera you should have. If you have technical difficulties or learning, that's a separate issue. You can figure that out. You are a smart person. You will figure it out. But there's no magic camera. There's no magic car. There's no magic pill. It just all takes time. So I hope that helps you guys. Try to get those cameras snapping, take pictures of life. I know this Corona stuff is so crazy and I keep meaning to take some kind of creative picture, but it's, you know, it'll happen this week, right? I'll get creative this week in the middle of everything. But anyway, I hope you guys are all well. I hope you have a good weekend. Stay home, stay healthy. Don't drink any bleach. Miss all you guys, and I hope you're having a great day.